Hello everyone, Albert here again with another tutorial, this time on CSS. So before we go to our topic for today, I just want to highlight some resources briefly on HTML that you can take advantage of. I did the first tutorial on HTML, but it was brief, of course. We didn't cover everything, but with what we covered, you can use these resources I'm going to share with you now to search and learn how to use whatever you want to use in your project. This is a very useful website, MDN Web Docs. So just go to your favorite browser and type HTML space MDN, and then you click the first URL. So this is basically a comprehensive documentation on every HTML tag. As you can see here, you have introduction, you can read all this, but if you come to HTML element and click on the drop down, you can see there is a long list of elements, various elements, and of course you find here elements that we used before and many more which we have not used. So for instance, the H1, we used the H1 in our last tutorial. You can see an example here and the appearance. So basically you can find anything here you want to use. Just click on it. We used the LI the last time. There is even an example and how it appears here. So guys, basically this is your go-to, okay? Because being a developer, basically, it's being able to go through documentations, okay, and find what you want, find what you need to use at a particular project, in a particular project. So basically, this is very useful. I really wish when I was getting started, I was aware of a resource like this, but you are having it here from my YouTube channel. So let's go to our topic for today, which is CSS. So we are going to talk about CSS fundamentals briefly. I've prepared very nice slides just for me to briefly explain what CSS is all about. So CSS simply stands for Cascading Style Sheets, okay? And CSS is very powerful. We spoke about what HTML does in our last tutorial. We said that HTML gives you the basic structure, okay? Like how elements are, the appearance, not the appearance, but it gives the structure of the page, okay? So what CSS does is that CSS brings in the beauty on your page, on your website. What do I mean by beauty? If you want to add colors, for instance, you use CSS. You want to add nice layout, for instance, changing the position of elements. Any fancy thing you want to do on your website, you will be using the power of CSS, okay? So let's just go through the slides briefly. It's about 5 minutes, not long. So CSS describes the visual style and presentation of the content in HTML. I already explained this. And CSS consists of countless properties that developers use to format the content. Properties about fonts, as I have explained, text, spacing, and layout. How to select and style elements. This is very important. This is basically what you will need to get, one of the main things you need to get out of this video. How to select and style elements. Before ever you style an element, an HTML element, you must select it, okay? As you can see here, a selector plus a declaration block gives what is called a CSS rule. Now you can see from the image here, everything highlighted red is a declaration block, and the H1, you already know this element H1, okay, from our last tutorial. So that's a selector. You get it from your HTML file. This is first of all, the first question there are a series of questions you may like to ask yourself. Okay, what element do I want to apply my CSS on? You answer that question, you get the element. The next question you should ask yourself, what property, okay, do I want to apply on that element? When I say property here, for instance, color is a property, okay? And the next question is, what value do I want to give to that property? So for instance, blue, okay? So blue is the value, color is a property, and the H1 is the selector, which is the element where you want to apply your CSS. So this summarizes everything about CSS, okay? So every HTML element in the web page can be seen as a rectangular box. This is very, very important. This is really important. If you are able to capture this, working with CSS will be really, really easy. Okay. Each of these boxes can have content, a border, and space inside and outside. Okay. I unfortunately covered some part of the text. But yeah, so this is the rectangular box that is used to represent every HTML element. Sorry. This is the rectangular box used to represent every HTML element on your web page. For instance, the H1 element can be represented by this rectangular box. What does that mean? It has a margin, okay? It has a padding. It has a width, okay? It has the height and the content itself. The content, for instance, is what goes inside the H1. That is the content. And the height is the height it occupies, of course. And then the width, of course, that it occupies. And you have the padding. Let's talk about this more on the next slide. Our last slide, by the way. So the content is the text, as I said earlier, or the images. And we saw that we also have a border. Let's see the image. The border separates the margin and the padding. Okay, so the border separates the margin. As you can see here, this is the border, this black. All right, so there's a line around the element. It's still inside of the elements, so very important to note. It's inside elements. The padding is spaced around the content. It's inside the element. It's important to note those properties that are inside the element, padding, border, okay? Because why? They will add up to the total width of the element. All right? You don't need to understand everything here. It takes, we'll get to practice and write code. You see what I'm talking about. So then, after the padding, you have the margin. The margin is the space outside of the element. Okay, space outside of the element. So it's basically, for instance, if you have two, like we had a list of elements in our last tutorial, or let's say you have any list, okay, the space between one list and another is basically called the margin, and the fill area is the area that gets filled with background color or background image. Okay, so as you can see here, all this filled with this color is the fill area. All right, so without wasting much time, let's go right ahead and start writing code. Okay, so I'll go to my Visual Studio Code, and as you can see, during our last tutorial, we had written this HTML. So today we are going to use it and continue from there. And if you don't have this code, I really advise, especially if you're a beginner, I advise you to go and watch the first tutorial. However, if you don't want, I will still leave a link to this source code in the description of this video. Okay, so let me show you how this looks like on the browser. So this is what it looks like. This was what we did in our last tutorial, and that's the code I've just shown you there. And what we are going to achieve today, let me just show you what we are going to achieve today. What we are going to achieve today. Okay, what are we going to achieve today? Let me run 1 minute, guys. So this is, yes, guys, here is what we are going to achieve today. As you can see, we have played around with this content. This content was on this side below the picture, but now we have used the power of CSS to bring it on the left, okay, on the left of the picture. I want you to note the differences. This is the old result that we had in our last tutorial. Here is what we are going to design today. It's very simple, but it will teach you the basics, fundamentals, everything you need to know to get started using CSS in your website, in your project. Okay, so without wasting much time, let's go and start writing code. Okay, you should be writing code more than talking. All right, so we are going to do, of course, some changes on this markup. What do I mean markup? This structure. So normally, but this will come with experience. Okay, there is a particular structure you may want to have in order to apply your CSS. For instance, you want to divide your markup, your HTML, into containers. Okay, and to most commonly in CSS, to define a container, you use the div tag. I think we didn't talk about this div tag in our last class, but it's nothing special or extraordinary. It's just an HTML element used to define a container. So I'll just cut that image and the name and put them inside the container. So now, when I was explaining the slides, I spoke about selectors. To select an element, I said there are 3 questions you ask yourself. The first question is, what element do I want to apply my CSS? Okay, and once you answer that question, the next thing you need to do is to give that element a selector. And we have what we call class selectors. Okay, class selectors are defined with the keyword class. So for instance, I want to give this container, I have defined here a class. So I'll go inside the opening tag and define a class selector. So I want to give the name of the class as left. Okay, you can give yours anything. Now the next thing, I want to define another container which will contain the p tag and the UL. Okay, so I'll define another div and then inside put the paragraph and the UL. I'll also go inside the opening tag of the second container, give it a class. This time I'll call it right. Okay, and yeah, this is so far what I want to do here. And lastly, before I forget, I've added this get in touch text together with the emoji inside the span tag. So just do that changes there. Okay, so there shouldn't be much difference for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and just to prove that there shouldn't be any difference much, let's go to our old page. Yeah, see, it's open with live server, so any changes would reflect immediately, but you can see no changes because why? We have not added CSS. We just introduce containers. Okay, we just divided the HTML into containers. Basically, that's what we did right there. So the next thing, this is the point you should really pay attention, because we are going to write what is known as external CSS. There are different ways you can write CSS. You can write inline, internal, and external CSS. But I'm going to show you the best way to write your CSS. That way you should use whenever you have a project. Okay. So the first thing I want you to do is to come here in your folder. The first icon says new file. Create a file called styles.css. Now this time the extension is not a .html but a .css, because this is a what? Is a CSS file. Now these two files cannot communicate as they are. What do I mean? If you write any CSS here, it will not affect any element that is here. In order to connect the two files, you need to tell the HTML about this CSS file. How? Go inside your head elements and using a link tag. Okay. Now guys, I'm using the shortcut here. I think you should have this. Just write link and press tab. Okay. It will bring for you the element together with the attribute. So the link element is used to link to a CSS file from your HTML. It has two attributes, the rel and the href. The rel tells the HTML that this is a style sheet. Remember the meaning of CSS, cascading style sheet. And the href is where we put the path to the file. Okay, and the path to the file here is // and then CSS. Now here you need to be careful. This will normally change. What do I mean it will change? For instance, if you put this CSS file into a folder, then you first of all need to reference the folder before the file. What do I mean? Let's create a folder called CSS. I use the second icon here, and I'll move this style.css inside that folder. So now for me to reference these styles inside this folder, if I just use this, it's not correct. I have to say first of all /css/styles, because why? Styles is now inside the CSS folder. Okay. So normally you want to organize your files, especially if you have too many CSS files you have created. You want to put them in their own folder. That's why I'm showing this technique or this tip here, right here. I don't want you to just know how to write code. I want to show you all the best practices that you can start using in your projects. Okay. So as I said, this is the result we want to achieve, and we have created our CSS file. And what else do we have? We also have linked the two files. Okay, so the next thing is for us to get started writing our CSS. Now the first thing I'll normally do, okay, is to get every import that we need to get. And in this project we are importing a font family. Okay, the font family is basically the type of, if you have used Microsoft Word, it's called I think it's also called font family there. It's just how the text appears. Okay, so but here in web development you have we have resources from where we can import fonts. So one of the free options we have is Google Fonts. Just go to your browser, for instance, and type Google Fonts. And then you see the first URL, just go there. Today we are using a font called Oxygen. Oxygen. Okay, this is it. So I had already imported it, but let me just show you how to do it again. So you go there and you can see different thick boldness and styles of the fonts. Just add 3 of them. I added all of them by clicking this plus. You can see that they have been added here. So what all you need to do, come to this imports. We are not using the link. Come to the imports. Do not copy this style. Just copy from here to here. Leave the style, both the closing and the opening. Copy it and add it to your CSS file. So right here, just paste it. So the next thing, of course, as you can see, this HTML element is what wraps our whole file. Okay, our whole HTML file, everything. So what I'll normally do is to start by defining the font size from that, inside that element, to 10. Okay, I'll explain this later why it's important, but just write it there. The next thing I want to do is to reset basically both the margin and padding. We talked about these things earlier in the slides. Okay, so reset the margin to 0. Now margin has both left and right, both top and bottom, so I'm resetting everything to 0. The same thing for padding. Padding has both top, left and right, and bottom. Okay, I'm resetting everything to 0 because they have default values, but I don't want those default values because it's normally best practice to just set everything to 0 so that you know that the reference is 0. Okay, and I normally add the font size on the body tag, and just go back to your Google Fonts. It's there, just copy it. It's this Oxygen. Okay, don't mind me, there is another one I'd added before. So yeah, that's it. And the next thing I'll normally define here is a font size. Font size of, let me see, 2 rems. Now guys, this rem is the units. Okay, normally you have different units. You have pixel, you have rems, but the one I want you to start using is rems. Why? Because rems will not give you problems. Rems will always adapt according to the size of the screen. And I defined this here to be 10 because this rems is relative to the font size in the HTML tag. What do I mean? Because I defined the font size to be 10 here, okay? Now, any font size I defined anywhere will be referenced to this 10. So the calculation will now be 2 times 10. So this is the same as 20 pixels. So 2 rems will be equals to 20 pixels. Okay? Just multiply what is here and here. This is very important and it will make life easier for you. Normally the default value of this thing is 16. I set it to 10 just for me to make it easier for myself to multiply. Okay. So the next thing, what do I want to do? If you can see our finished page, basically there's a changes in the alignment. So the first thing I need to do to achieve that is to put both the image and the name and everything here in a container. So I'll just copy everything here, all these divs I added earlier, and I'll add them inside another div. So a parent container basically, and I'll define a class of container there. Okay, so now I'll target this class in my CSS. How? Whenever you are calling a class in your CSS, you start with a dot. Okay, so this is the selector. Dot container is the selector, and then the declaration block, as we learned in the slides. So the first thing I want to do with this container is to change the display. I want to change the display to flex, and I'll make a separate tutorial for Flexbox. Flexbox is a very powerful CSS addition. So now let's see what we have. So this is our product we are trying to make, like this. So now you can see that just by changing this display to flex, we have been able to move this content here. But guys, be careful. The structure must be according to how I have divided them. You can see that I have two children divs inside my container, and I'm declaring this container to be a flex. So don't miss that. Okay, so the next thing, you can see that these two containers are really close to each other, the image and the text. And if you can remember from the slides, what property do we use to separate two containers? Guys, let's just go again to the slides briefly. And that was the last slide. What property do we use to define space between two containers? You got it right there, the margin. The margin is the space between elements. Okay, guys, I'll also leave a link to these slides in the description so that you may have it for reference. So yeah, so we need the margin between those two containers. Okay, but now for margin, of course, we have margin left and right. So if we can target the right container and apply a margin left on it, we'll be able to get the result we want. So dot right in the margin left. Now for margin left, if you just write ML and press tab, it will auto complete for you. But if it doesn't work for you, you can just write it again in full. So I'll give it a dimension of 2 rems, which equals to 20 pixels. So let me see. Yeah, you can see that we have a space there now. See, there was no space before. Now the next thing, I want to target this H1. This H1, I want it to be at the center of the picture. Okay, so how do I target it? Inside, let's go to the HTML. Now we have this class who is the parent of both the image and the H1. So to target it, there are different ways you can target a particular element. Okay, so you can target it using the H1, but the downside of using just the H1 is that in case you have multiple H1s in your HTML, it will bring a problem. So to make sure that we are only targeting the H1 inside the left container, we use first of all the left, left, and then H1, and then open the declaration block. What we want to do there is to change the property called text alignment, text align in short, to center. So now you can see the name has been centered here. Okay, the next thing we want to do is basically change both the margin left and right of this container. So basically we don't even need of the right container. We want to put margin both here and here. Okay, so if we do that, right, and just change the margin. Now there's a shortcut for the margin left, right and bottom. If I just use 0 as the first value, okay, it will be for the top and the bottom. If I use 4 here, okay, and close it, the 4 will be applied on both the left and the right. So let's see, as you can see here. Okay, so now what I want to do on the left is actually to apply a margin here, so that the picture will move a bit. So on the left, and actually then I don't need this here, it's redundant, because why? I've already defined right here. Okay, so let me just change this to left, left, left. Okay guys, I need to speed up, the video is getting really long. So left to margin, so you can see it has created space here. Now the next thing I need to do is to change the line height of this text, of everything here. And to do that, I'll just target the left container, including the paragraph and then the UL. So to do that, I'll say right paragraph UL. Okay, I'll change the font size there. Change the font size to 2 rems, which is equals to 20 pixels, of course. The line height to 4. Let's see how that looks way better. The last thing I want to do here is this, write down the footer. Now here I want to show you another way you can target elements. So here we have been using classes. You can see dot left, dot container, dot right. I want to show you that you can use the element itself to target the element. So here we have a footer. Okay, so I can directly use the footer, okay, as a selector. So a selector can be the element itself, or you can define a class inside the element. There's another way which I'll show you maybe in another tutorial. So what I want to do here is to text align center, and then margin bottom. Margin bottom, you can just say MB, and then 2 rems. So you can see just that one has centered everything. The next thing I want to do is to target the span. I want to add the text, the font size of this span. So what I can do is to say footer, and inside the footer, target the span and give it a font size of 3 rems. You can see it got much bigger. And the next thing, I want to target these links. Okay, they are anchor tags A. So I want to save inside the footer. Yeah, so inside the footer we are targeting the anchor tag. Okay, the anchor tag. And what we want to do, we want to change the font size to 3 rems, and then the margin left to 2 rems, and then the color to blue. Here I just want to demonstrate to you that you can change the color of the icons to any color you want. Okay, and here lastly I want to show you something that you see here. When you hover, you can change the color once the cursor is on the icon. And for you to do that, we use what is known as pseudo pseudo selectors. You can write the tag, the elements, and then or a selector that targets the element. But here we are using the anchor itself because we want to apply it to all the anchor elements. Okay, so we just say a and then column, then we use the pseudo selector over. I want to say when any of the links is over, we want to change the color to purple. Let's see, that's right there, it's working. So guys, this is what we want to achieve, and we have achieved it using the power of CSS. Okay, so guys, there are many more properties you can learn, you can use in your projects. I'll still do another tutorial on CSS. I said I'll talk about Flexbox. We still have to talk about responsive design, which uses also the power of CSS. What do I mean by responsive design? For example, you see, when the size of the screen is reducing, you see the text becomes so shrink. So we don't want that. We want it to be able to respond. For instance, we want to say when the screen gets smaller, okay, maybe you want this side to go below the picture again as it was before. But that we'll do in another tutorial because this video is already getting long. Lastly, I just want to show you again this documentation. You can still use it for CSS. You can just go to your browser and type CSS MDN. You go there, you find the complete list of properties as you can see here. And you can learn them, use them in your project. And guys, just go innovative. There is a lot you can do with these technologies. Okay, so thank you for watching this tutorial. I believe you have learned something. Kindly subscribe, share it to your friends, to your colleagues, and see you here again in another tutorial. Thank you.